Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to share with you what I read for Fortnight Frights. So this was a readathon held during the last 2 weeks of October, where you are encouraged to read kind of like spooky or macabre things. And I was trying to go for a bingo, so I'll run you through what I actually read for those prompts. So the first prompt I was going for was to read a piece of dark fantasy. And for this, I chose the graphic novel Monstress by Marjorie and illustrated by Takeda, or Takeda. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. So I just read volume 1, Awakening. And this book, I'm going to find it hard to talk about because I found it quite confusing. So it's set in a world where there are these people called arcanics, and they have like animal type attributes. So some of them have like little ears or tails or wings. And then there is like the rest of the population. I don't really know what was going on, but these two like factions, I guess, of people are, I guess, at war with each other. And we follow a girl who is an arcanic, but who doesn't look it. Like, she doesn't have any like physical animal like characteristics. But she is kind of like on a quest. I'm not quite sure what that quest is. She's trying to find someone. And she has like a monster, like a god-like being who is kind of like living inside of her. And all of these monsters had like previously been vanquished, killed? I don't know. Anyway, it's so hard to talk about because there's so much going on and I didn't follow all of it. My impressions of this, or my thoughts on this, are that the illustrations are absolutely gorgeous and grotesque as the story calls for. I'm not going to do a cutaway. I'm just going to see if I can get you to see some of these illustrations. This. So yeah, the illustrations were fabulous. The world building was really cool. It has this like steampunk Art Deco vibe, which was really great. But the story itself was really hard to follow. The mythology is very dense and convoluted, and in my opinion, needlessly so. Like, you didn't have to have all that stuff right off the bat. I think the writer has like a lot of ideas, but I think those have to be parsed out over time as you're building a mythology so your reader can follow along, because I couldn't follow much of this. So there's enough here in terms of the world building and the art style for sure. And also, I mean, just look at this. It is quite graphic, though, just to be warned. There are some illustrations that are a little much, but I think it works in service of the graphic novel. But yeah, the world building was great. The illustrations are phenomenal. And I think some of the characters were quite interesting. So I might try the second volume because of that, but if I end the second volume and I am as confused as I was at the end of this, then I'll probably pass on the rest of them. So that was Monstress. The next prompt I'm gonna have to like check was written by Indigenous author, and for this I listened to The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones on audio. It follows this group of Blackfeet men who had basically committed a crime against nature, I guess you could say. They had hunted some elk in an area that they weren't supposed to. It was reserved for the use of the elders on the reservation, and they hunted elk there, and also the hunting expedition kind of goes quite wrong. And so 10 years later, this elk basically is seeking revenge for being wronged. And I just love that, because this was very much kind of like, I know what you did last summer type of vibes. But I love how the revenge plot was hinged on this like misuse of nature, because it really goes into that that Native American tradition of using all the animal, and there were certain rituals or certain traditions when you're hunting, and like how that should be done, and when it's not followed, I love how that was the crux of why they were being hunted by this undead elk, I guess you could call it. It also had a really interesting, it wasn't even really a twist, but it was just like a complete change of pace about a third of the way through the book. I won't give spoilers, but the story is unraveling in one way, and I thought I knew where it was going, and then all of a sudden something happens a third of the way through the book where you take like a hard turn, and I was like, oh, we're not following that anymore, we're off in another direction. So that was really interesting. I don't think the writing was anything special. I think this was very much a plot-driven story for me, but this is the first horror book I've read in a long time that was actually horror. Like, that was actually horrific. That had all of the horror tropes that I like. And when I say it's plot-driven, I really did find the characters interesting. I don't think there was like a ton of characterization, but overall very interesting and enjoyable horror book, at least for me. I think there were some problems with pacing, especially with regards to some of the action scenes. I also found some of the action scenes confusing. There was one part where I think there might have been a flashback and I just didn't realize it or something, but I was confused because I thought someone was like outside of this like sweat lodge, but then all of a sudden they were back inside. But I got very confused, and I don't know if that's the fault of how the scene was written out, or if that was just maybe following along with an audiobook wasn't the right way for me to get to understand the action scenes. So that's a quibble I have with it. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting, and I will list some own voices reviews of this book as well. So the next prompt I wasn't actually able to do. So it was a book with a green cover, and I was going to read Mexican Gothic, and then that had like a 16-week wait at my library. Well, I was originally going to read something else, but I couldn't get my hands on that either. So I ended up just going completely away from that bottom line and choosing another random prompt. So I didn't get bingo, but whatever, and read something written by an author from Asia. So I read this manga, The Girl from the Other Side, by Nagabe, and that artist is from Japan. And this was recommended by Kat from Biblio Obscura. And this was just like sweet and wholesome mixed with dark kind of fairy tale elements. It is, I would say, probably like middle grade. It is kind of dark and foreboding, but there's nothing in here that I think is terribly frightening or graphic. But it's set in this world where you have humans, and then you have people who, they're kind of like monsters. They're called outsiders. I guess they used to be humans, but they are cursed and become the outsiders. And it's basically this illness or this plague where if an outsider touches you, then you get cursed and you become an outsider. And so they're all relegated to the outside, hence outsider. And there's this big wall around the insiders, the humans who live kind of clustered together. And so they're separated, and the humans really fear the outsiders. But there is this one little girl who, we don't know why, but she has been abandoned. She's living on the outside. And one of the outsiders, who she calls teacher, is taking care of her, explains to her that he's not allowed to touch her and that she can't touch him, otherwise she will be cursed. And he's trying to protect her from being cursed and protect her on the outside. And also he is trying to keep hidden from her the fact that she was abandoned there. She thinks her aunt is coming back to get her, but it seems like the aunt has like purposely left her there. We don't know why. We kind of still don't know why at the end of the book, because this is the first of I think many volumes, but I am definitely carrying on with this. Love the atmosphere, love the story. I love the character of the little girl and the teacher, And yeah, this was like equal parts like dark and sweet. So I really, really enjoyed that. So the last prompt I was going for on that original line was written by a Black or African author. And for this, I chose White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. And this was kind of a disappointment to me. I think there would be some people who would really get on with this, but I didn't. So this is another book that I just found needlessly confusing. So we start off the book where, I'll just show you, we start out with where is Miranda? So you know at the beginning of the book that Miranda is going to go missing. So Miranda is one of two twins. They are living in this house with this kind of like, I thought it was haunted, but really it's like its own entity. It's like sentient. And it's like housing the ghosts of a few of her like female ancestors. Like her mother had recently died, and I think like her grandmother and great grandmother are like embodied in this house in a way. And Miranda, her mental health and physical health is deteriorating post the death of her mother. She suffers from a condition called pica, where you are compelled or have a compulsion to eat non-food items. So in her case, she is just surviving off of like pieces of chalk and like little flakes of plastic. And so she's deteriorating, and you kind of follow her in this house where the house is like trying to protect her, but also is potentially like part of her worsening state. The most interesting part for me was actually the section where Miranda goes to college, and we shift perspectives to a young woman who Miranda meets there and starts a relationship with called, I don't know if her name is pronounced or Ore, but we switched to her perspective, and I found that much clearer to follow because Ore doesn't have this kind of like inner fog confusion that Miranda does. And so I found her perspective much easier to follow. I liked her as a protagonist more. I could follow along a little bit better, but it just, I think there was cool atmosphere. I think there was cool use of different like elements. Like I liked the house as this like entity, and I'm pretty sure the house was also racist because when Ore comes to visit, like Ore's Black, and the house is like trying to expel her and like wants her to have nothing to do with Miranda, and is like saying things to make it pretty clear that it's her race that is the problem. So I found that interesting, like a racist haunted house. And I just feel like this was a wasted opportunity because I feel like Miranda's spiraling and like her pica, like that could have been explored more. And I feel like it was just touched on as a service. Like, yeah, she has pica and she is fading, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And what really frustrated me is that I felt that it was purposefully confusing or purposefully abstract to the point where too much is left unsaid and you don't even really know what's going on. And I can't survive on atmosphere alone. I have to have a little bit clue as to what's happening. And also the fact that we start with knowing that Miranda's going to go missing. You get to the end and Miranda goes missing. Like, that's not a spoiler, but then there's nothing else to that story. And so I felt like there was no suspense. There was no anything keeping me going because I already knew how it was going to end, and I knew there was not really going to be a resolution to that. And so even though this was quite a short book, I like struggled not to DNF this. I really wanted to give it a go because I've heard good things about this author and like what she's doing for the horror genre, but it just wasn't quite my cup of tea. But if you don't mind things that are kind of like abstract, if you're a fan of like weird French experimental films, then I think you would love this. That's my thought on that book. So one more I just wanted to mention briefly that wasn't part of Fortnight Frights for me, but it's witchy, so I think I can put it in with this list. Is this little middle grade graphic novel called Witches of Brooklyn by Sophie Escabasse, and it is so wholesome and sweet. It follows Effie, whose mother has just died, and she is sent to go live with her aunts in Brooklyn, and she finds out that they have maybe some magical secrets, and she finds out, I think, pretty early on that they're witches, and that it runs in the family. And there's a little pretty low stakes problem that arises that they have to use their powers to help with. And I love the relationship that she builds with her aunts, and they're very like supportive of her. Like even really early on, one of them like loses her temper and goes and apologizes to Effie, and then Effie is taken aback, like I've never had a grown-up apologize to me. And I thought it just I loved how it handled like adult child relationships. I thought that was just like wonderful. It's like I said, just very sweet and wholesome. The art style is very, very cute. Just show you some there. This is the first book that I have successfully, like first chapter type book, even though it's a graphic novel, that I have successfully read with my 5-year-old. I've been trying to get her to let me read aloud to her from a chapter book, but because this had pictures, I was reading a chapter to her a night, and we finished it last night, and then she has asked for us to restart it again tonight, so she loved it. It's definitely appropriate for all ages, and so I'm really excited that at least my daughter will let me read graphic novels to her out loud now. So that's something, because up until now it's only been picture books. So we're graduated to the next level. So if you have a young child in your life, I would highly recommend this. I think it was really just a little gem of a middle grade graphic novel. So those were the things that I read the last couple of weeks of October. If you participated in Fortnight Frights or you've read any great horror lately, please let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for great new horror novels and like spooky things to read. And as always, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care.